The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission was at pains to explain the purchase of Integrity Centre at a cost of 1.5 billion shillings. Appearing before the National Assembly Public Accounts Committee, EACC's commissioners said Parliament had okayed the purchase of the building. According to the Commissioner Paul Gashoka, the deal to purchase the building was made between the National Lands Commission, Parliament and the Treasury. The Commission was also at pains to explain why they agreed to release payments before examining the structural plans for the buildings.
This land had been bought by Tegus at 400 million, hardly 4 years before. Then you are buying it at 1.5 billion, almost 4 times in a space of 4 years. Even if it's appreciation, that is way beyond any appreciation of land that we know of.
Parliament advised that EACC should proceed to compulsorily acquire Integrity Centre. Consequently, EACC requested the National Treasury void dated 10th April 2017 to advise on the process of a compulsory acquisition. The National Treasury advised on the process of compulsory acquisition void data that dated 13th April 2017. Further, the National Treasury allocated 1.2 billion in financial year 2017-18 towards the compulsory acquisition.
I'm asking Commissioner Gachoka, yes, why did you go ahead to authorize the procurement of this property without first getting access to the designs? What were you buying, if I may ask you?
That the issues that the honorable members are raising are the issues that we as commissioners had raised.
Yeah.
Sorry. And it is the issue, and you realize that this process of acquisition had gone on for years. In our report.
Or you raised as a commission?
Even in the issue of the drawings, we have requested for the drawings.
So you are at a commission, you had those issues
and
yourselves?
Remember, yes, you know, I'm a procurement specialist, by the way. I chaired the Public Procurement Appeals Board. If this thing was going, it was not through, you know, the normal procurement process. And that is why you realize that when it comes to the national compulsory acquisition, it is different from acquisition.
How did somebody who's acquiring for you the land, which is the National Land Commission, at the same time do for you valuation? It's like this Chinese contract, where they give the loan, they do the road, they commission it, and they hand it over.
Allow me to introduce our panelists this morning. If you're joining us, we had actually introduced the two of them at the beginning of the program. Right now also, we have with us Otende Molo, who is a Member of Parliament from Rarieda. We have Jacob Midio as well, who is a former Member of Parliament from Gem. We have Senator Kimani Umatangi, who is a Senator for Kiambu. We have with us as well Dr. Eseli Simiyu, Member of Parliament from Tongaren, I should say, and also Senator Aaron Cheriot, who is a Senator for Kericho. Good morning, gentlemen, again.
Good morning, Debal.
Right. We just want to also focus on the two stories that we've done as far as currencies is concerned, and also the EACC. I know we've had this debate here previously, if Jacob may remember, on the EACC and the sale of Integrity Centre. Controversial, where also some of officials within EACC were involved and in that controversy. But before we even continue, Senator Matangi.
Yes.
Good morning.
Morning, Debal.
Right. We are eagerly waiting for you.
Today, this morning?
Yes.
Thank you for waiting for me. What's the deal?
The deal is now you should be kneeling here before, yeah, because you're late.
You know, Jacoyo.
It's a pact we had, all of us. Yeah.
Jacoyo was pointing to the spot when I walked in. But I had a good excuse.
You had a good excuse?
I had a very good, actually I had a good reason, not an excuse.
Okay.
So next time.
So we excuse you today?
Yes, and because on account of all the number of times when I arrive early.
Okay, let's just clear the air on the EACC. First of all, Integrity Centre, the sale of it, that we see that particular figure has been blotted, and this was actually in front of Dr. Eseli yesterday. The history of EACC has been very controversial, as in the EACC, the Integrity Centre itself has been controversial. We've had even some of, the panelists representing some of, I think, bank transactions that were done, and money is going to some of the EACC officials as well. I don't know if this particular appearance before the committee will make any discernible difference, because we've tried before, or they've tried before, nothing has come out of it.
I think it's a difficult situation you put me and
Otiende, yes.
And Otiende in, because we are members of that committee, and discussing committee affairs before we complete it and have resolutions made on it, I think would be against the standing orders. However, this is a controversy that has been in the public domain for a while, and now the Public Accounts Committee is seized of the matter after the Auditor General's report. So we are going to delve into it and see if we can get shed some light on that controversial purchase of Integrity Center. But I think I would be very constrained to try to add anything more than that, because then I would be breaching the standing orders, and that might not be very good for me. Yeah.
No, we respectively also observe that as well. But let's hear from Otiende, then we can move on to Jacomedio.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Eseli, because the matter is live. Indeed, the EACC appeared before us yesterday, and we adjourned to continue in the inquiry. And all one can say first is that the EACC is appearing routinely before the PAC as a form of public accountability, which is constitutional. And so any instance of historical discussion may not have come in the context in which PAC is now looking at the matter, because now for the first time it has come in its proper form for inquiry. Secondly, it's a matter that would have to be discussed very carefully under advisement, not just by us as members of PAC, but even by other colleagues, to the extent that there's nothing wrong so far with indicating the issues that arose, but we cannot draw any preliminary conclusions, at least from where I sit as of now. So the only thing I can say is to rephrase the issues that arose, not how they are dealt with. And so far there are 4 issues that arose on which the committee is still inquiring. And the first issue is whether the EACC properly compulsorily acquired. There's what we call compulsory acquisition, as opposed to acquiring property by negotiation. Compulsory acquisition is where the government decides that it wants some particular land and it must have it, and whether the owner wants to sell it or not, then the government will have it. As opposed to by private treaty, where you say, we want this building and you also want to sell, what is the sale price, can we negotiate it or not? That's the first issue. The second issue that was under consideration is the value of the property. And the issue being that in 2013, it is said that those who owned the property acquired it for 400 million. And in 2017, then the EACC paid 1.53 billion for the same property. And so the committee is inquiring as to whether that was reasonable. The third issue was about valuation of that property. Under compulsory acquisition, the National Land Commission is mandated to acquire the property on behalf of the government. But in this case, it is also the National Land Commission that valued the property. And so the issue arose as to whether, as the person acquiring, it is legitimate for you also to be the one valuing and not the Ministry of Land. And the last issue so far, well, there were many other small issues, was the process of the change of the property.
Yes.
You will remember that this is property that was held by Trust Bank. Then it came into the hands of the DPF. Then it moved from the hands of the DPF to the private entities in a way that was explained. Whether that explanation is reasonable or not is for a later date. But that process of change of ownership was also an issue there. So I would not want to say anything in terms of, beyond the issues that arose for now.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Jacoyo, if maybe you can refresh your memory from where this is emanating from.
I would have liked to ask Otiende that chronology. Has it come before you? Who are the lawyers informed, the law firm informed? I was a member of Finance Committee when this issue arose. And as a law firm, of Mubaya, who later became Mubaya Aden and Wetangula, that later became Mubaya, who has now been appointed ambassador. They were the ones collecting rent from EACC for many years, and we raised the issue. It is interesting, Edibal, the gentleman who has just spoken has said something very interesting, that sometime in 2017, Parliament advised the compulsory acquisition. I didn't know Parliament has those powers to advise government to compulsory acquire something. Number two, he said that in April, they sent a letter to Treasury. 2017, that was 4 months to the election. So you must look at the timing of it. Mm-hmm. And the time to steal this money from Kenyans when Parliament was already home. Because Parliament, if you look at the election calendar, you see that people actually were sent home just around that time. I can't remember the exact date, but it was March sometime. Or yes, then we were called back just to come and redo the budget, to pass it. It is not possible that there was anything like that that came before Parliament. So that is where a criminal investigation must start. This is a serious criminal case. And from the way the guy is talking, there is somebody in Parliament who was involved, or a few people in Parliament were involved, and EACC people were involved. I can also tell you, Land Commission is culpable, because everything there, there's nothing they are saying there which is logical debate. We must know, here we have an MP who is in a law firm involved in this thing. Then you have the deputy director of EACC who is also involved in the same law firm. This is as dirty as it gets. They should, if I was the DCI, I would be following this case from the beginning. But lastly, Dibal, how is this different from the cases of land in SGR? Who owned this house originally, this building? Mm-hmm. This is government building. Government acquiring a building, somebody purporting to have bought a building of the government, then selling to the government. It is not their, it's not theirs. This is government house. The only thing, it's called integrity center, but the only thing it lacks is integrity, and this whole process lacks integrity. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, let's hear from Aaron Cheriot.
You know, the reason I am laughing Dibal is because it tells you of our challenges sometimes as a country. You know, somebody who's not from Kenya will be forgiven if they realized later that actually what we are discussing is corruption at the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
Yes.
It just tells you how interesting a republic we are, and how the whole of this capture thing is, and how as a society, you know, many times I see you people in the media, Dibal, when you talk about corruption, you look at us the politicians. Mm. But politicians, for example, the active ones, there are only 400 in this country, out of over 40 million Kenyans. So it tells you we are 0.1%. For corruption to thrive the way it thrives, it tells you that the rest of Kenyans are perhaps even more complacent and part of the rot more than even the politicians. The psyche and the mind of a Kenyan is that given an opportunity at whatever place, even when you make them head of security at a building like Nation Building down here, for somebody to come in, they'll devise a way of extorting something from them. It is something that we have within us as Kenyans, which is really unfortunate. And the debate that we have never been able to shift to Because we love talking about it, and it appears as if you can only talk about corruption and you think about particular politician that you like and you don't like. If it is about the gold scam, because now it is linked towards a particular faction that you don't like, yeah, you cheer and say, yeah, we must know the truth about this. If it shifts to another issue that now appears to be tainting a particular political camp that you dislike, then people cheer on. It tells you how unserious we are about this particular issue. Yet it is a serious societal problem. What we have is a breakdown of our complete values system as a society. It has absolutely nothing to do with the politicians and the people in office. It is us. What is it that has happened to our country that makes almost every other particular Kenyan, given an office, they become vulnerable and they think that the only thing I've come to do in this particular office is to make money, which is really, it happens in the media, it happens almost in every other place. I think as a society we must press our reset button and be able to question and say, what is it that it will benefit you as an individual?
Right, but we have a director of national values and cohesion in this country.
NCIC?
Not in actually, this is a very independent body from NCIC, and I think it's in the office of the president. What do they do when it comes to national values and the cohesion? We've never heard from the
Do you know who that person is?
Yes.
What is his name?
His name is Josiah Musili.
You can see, you have to read. Because you don't even know him. Yeah. You can see you have to use Mwakeja. What does he do?
I'm surprised even you do not know that we have a director of a national cohesion. Yes, so when it comes to instituting the national values in this country, which is Article 10 of the Constitution, this should be the remit of this directorate, isn't it?
Yeah, it's true.
But what is the Parliament doing to make sure that such people also are accounted for? Because they draw from the exchequer.
Parliament is a patient also in hospital.
Parliament is a patient.
Just like the rest of Kenya. So how can you ask them for medication?
Awatangi, you're a patient. Let's hear from you. Are you a patient?
Well, Dibal, you know, in this discussion, what comes to mind to me, and I was watching it yesterday on TV, is actually the effectiveness or the controls around usage of government installations around the country, and the amount that government spends around acquisition, especially for the newly created institutions by the Constitution, and especially the independent commissions. Because the other day I was passing from Kiambu Road, and I entered the DCI's headquarters there. And Dibali, if you look at that facility, it is big, it's enormous, it's modern, it has got buildings. Actually, if you enter the DCI's compound or complex, you wonder, you mean we have so much functions and so many people to be housed in such a facility, and what one would be asking themselves. Actually, that's what I was thinking as I was watching. Why would we be having a discussion around acquisition of a property so much, you know, for the EACC, for seamless functions, for example, for the symbiotic movement and deliverance of duties? Why, for example, wouldn't there be a consideration that EACC should have been housed together with the DCI headquarters? They just take one wing, and the other wing is the DCI's office, and that creates a seamless operation and saves a lot of money. If Dibali, you go around Nyayo House, I'm sure you've been there, maybe if you've been looking for a passport lately, and you go from the one tower to the other tower, top, bottom, you go to some of those offices above 5th floor onwards, you get amused at what happens in most of those offices. It's really, a wastage of space. You find big offices there, and nobody's sitting around there. So I think, we must rethink this seriously in the context of, are we just throwing money around? Ask yourself, Dibala, and I believe Kenyans would want to ask themselves this question. We have a fully fledged ministry with a Department of Public Works, that can undertake the role. And if you ask yourself the amount in those billions used to purchase the Integrity Center, less than half of that amount, indeed way less than half, is sufficient to build a better complex, in a better location. And so it's our priorities that we have wrong. It is the choices that we're making. And so I believe what we should be saying as we look at what has happened is it should be a lesson into our future. Should we allow, for example, when we now talk about IEBC and look at where they are here at Anniversary Towers, ask yourself, how much do they pay to be housed in there? You'll be surprised. You are looking at EACC and that purchase. If you calculate, for example, how much IEBC is paying for the occupancy of the space they occupy, it would be mind-boggling. Look at all the other commissions. And so, as we mop up money in the market to control corruption and try to inject sanity into our spending, what we should be looking at is indeed why and where are we losing money willingly, how we should be doing things in a better way.
Right. Yeah. I think that is done and dusted.
There are some questions that Jacob posed, and
I
think it is fair, I think, to both of us.
So you will wind up on
I think it's
questions.
fair to just put them in their perspective. Although I hear my friend Aaron Cheruiyot, but on this one, I don't know where political camps come in, because he took the subject and still brought it to the political camps. But I think this is a neutral inquiry that does not invite political camps. First, and this is only so that because Jacob posed the question and the listeners need to understand, the first issue is the statement from the EACC is that there was a letter from Parliament signed by the Clerk of Parliament following discussions between the EACC and the Legal Affairs Committee. So to the extent that Parliament works through committees, we will be discussing whether that is a decision of Parliament or a decision, a consultation between a committee and the EACC, whether that constitutes the action of Parliament. Secondly, what was tabled was a recommendation. And part of the discussion we're having with the EACC is whether a recommendation can amount to a directive for an independent entity. That's number one. The second one is in terms of the persons involved. One of the matters that are pending, and that's why we cannot comment on it, is we have asked EACC to advise us of the advocates who are involved both with the original sale and the subsequent sale. But having clarified that, let me come to the more general issue. There's a legitimate issue around expenditure by independent institutions and offices in this country in terms of rents and such like, because it is huge. When I was ombudsman, I did the analysis of the amount spent by such institutions, and you'll be surprised, because a single institution, as EACC was explaining to us yesterday, their expenditure in terms of rent per year was 85 million. So you can imagine how much anyone else spends. And that is spent on private buildings and private entities at a time that government has a lot of buildings, some of which are being sold, including this telecom house, I think, is on sale. And so the legitimate issue is also the question of rationalization. Why should one part of government find it necessary to sell some building to private entities while another part of government is buying private buildings from private entities? The third one around it is what Senator Matangi was talking about, and which is what we recommended. I recommended that like-minded or like institutions that do more or less comparable works should actually be clustered together, so that even if you have to construct one building, and this is a good practice in many countries, if you find an integrity house, then it is a house that houses like 8 or 10 institutions in government that deal with more or less related matters. And one of the proposals that I made then, which was adopted by the Auditor General, was for the Treasury to approve construction of a building that could house virtually all these commissions. You will be surprised, you know where the Israeli embassy is. The plot next, which is now used for parking as a parking lot, actually belongs to government. It belongs to the Auditor General. And the Auditor General, following that recommendation, requested Treasury to approve so that a big building could be constructed, which would house the Auditor General, would house a number of other institutions. The same treasury that approved the purchase of this integrity center at 1.5 billion declined that request by the Auditor General.
And the Auditor General is still housed at Anniversary Towers.
Anniversary Towers. So
right
there's
now.
a legitimate question outside of this inquiry into the rationalization of expenditure by government around private buildings and acquisition of private buildings. Lastly, you brought the question of national cohesion and all. I think it is right to say that the fundamental entity that Parliament so far can and should deal with is the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. Although you know that recently somebody went to court to challenge Parliament's involvement in terms of appointment, and that's a side issue. But even the idea of having a private entity, a private person and office in OP that deals with cohesion in itself is part of the problem. That you create independent institutions to deal with a matter, then you create parallel offices run within other ministries to deal with the same matter, and the end result is to cripple all of them. And now that's not the problem Parliament, because Parliament does not control what happens in OP. That is a problem of the institutional framework within the executive setup.
Right, thank you. I think that does it right now.
Just a small one. This Otiende has said something very interesting, that Legal Affairs Committee was the one which was consulted and gave an opinion. But all committees of Parliament submit reports to the plenary. This is a case of theft. You know, there is no parliamentary committee, Senate or National Assembly, that can do a report and the report becomes authentic. The report is only a report after approval of the general sitting. So if it is true that they dealt with some people in a Legal Affairs Committee, that just smacks of corruption. And I can tell you, that is not a report of Parliament.
Right. Let's eagerly await also for Dr. Eseli and Otiende Amolo to, carry on with their investigations, and if we'll get a report as well, then we can be able to try and tease out some of their findings as well on the program. But briefly, before we take a short break and I also buckle down to the topic of the day, we want just to comment or just get your reactions on the new currency and the debate that right now is on. Are we headed to the courts? Very briefly, we don't need to belabor the point. Dr. Eseli?
I think the decision was late. It should have been done much earlier to demonetize and change the currency, because the Constitution stated so. We took too long. We were supposed to have changed the currency after a certain period. But then we've taken so long, and now is when we are changing it. I think we took too long. I think it's wrong for anybody to feel that they are targeted unless they are part of the problem. Because I saw some people in church over the weekend claiming that they are being targeted. They don't have money in sacks and things like that. But nobody was targeting them, so why should they comment about it? They are targeting those fellows who have got fake money, the fake money circulating in the system. There are those who keep money in cash. Those are the ones they are targeting. So if anybody feels targeted, then they should know they are part of the problem of this country, and they have not been offering solutions. I think what central bank has done is correct, only that they did it very late. And then they have given too long a period, because it's almost 4 months for people to change whatever money they have.
Thank you.
I think they have given it too long, so it gives these people time to find a way of actually cleaning their money and getting it back. So I think they should have reduced the time, unless there's a real good reason why they chose that. Because when you look at the advert, they are talking of between 1 to 5 million and 5 million and so on. What informed them to make those figures, that it should be between 1 to 5 million? Is there really any economic or scientific basis for the decisions on the amounts, or is it just an arbitrary figure picked and placed there? Because I think for any Kenyan, for that matter, 1 million shillings is a lot of money. For any Kenyan, for that matter, 5 million is a hell of a lot of money. Many people work throughout their lives and they don't make 5 million.
Thank you.
So when you are talking about you can exchange this amount or you can exchange between 1 to 5 million, I think those arbitrary figures, they need to be explained.
Right, thank you. Let's hear from Aaron Cheruiyot. Do you think this will make a substantial difference in wiping out, some of these fake currencies that we do have, the money laundering that the government is targeting right now? Will it make any discernible difference?
I think it might, if executed well, and it appears to be going well so far.
How substantial?
Save for the few legal challenges that have been raised. You have seen the pleadings that have been made before the court by Simon Mbugua, and you've seen the one for Omtata. I have seen my friend Otiende raise also some fairly good arguments about it, with issues to do with the portrait of the first president of the country and the fact that it's clear violation of the provisions of our constitution. So sometimes you wonder, why do we have such a golden opportunity to do a marvelous thing? Then we mess it up by doing some very silly mistakes like that particular one. Otherwise, this was a good decision, first of all, to help us in so many aspects, because the gains far outweigh some of these little challenges.
Thank you.
That is good for the country. But you just question the decision making by many of our public officers who cannot simply, if the constitution says, please don't include the face or any resemblance of any particular person or personality. How difficult is that to execute? And if, in fact, let me propose this. If it ends up that the court finds that that constitutional provision has been violated, then the people who made this decision should be surcharged, so that civil servants can learn how to simply obey the dictates of our constitution.
Otena Mole, let's hear from you briefly, then we take a short break. Just briefly on this.
First, we have, for the last 9 years, been living in an illicit fiscal relationship. And in this panel I've demonstrated, and even now, that we have had a situation where new notes are printed, but they're all backdated to 16th July 2010, so as not to appear to offend the Constitution. For a serious country like this, and I dare you, and I've done this before, any note that you'll have, you'll see it's dated 16th July 2010. A country such as ours should not live in that kind of denial and hypocrisy. Secondly, I think this was a good move, but marred by a small unnecessary detail, as Aaron Cheruiyot is saying. The idea of launching a new note should be the greatest thing that happens. And it should not be a situation where then it is subject to interpretation and the governor of central bank says, we will leave it to the court to interpret. This should be a big thing that should not be the subject of judicial interpretation. It should be without any doubt. And thirdly, I agree that it is a good move and it might actually help us clean some of the copious and tons of amounts of money that people appear to keep in their houses. And I do not doubt, if going by some of the rates we've seen, where people, unimaginable amounts of money, including in foreign currency, are kept, including in banks. I shudder to imagine how much more such a person has kept in their vault in their house. And for that reason, I think that it's a very good move. It is a timely move. I don't know whether the idea of up to 1st of October is a good thing. I do not know what instructs that, but I would imagine that the governor of central bank has good reasons, because if it is too sudden, it might also interfere with the fiscal arrangements.
Thank you.
But I think it's a good thing.
Right. Well, we want to take a short break right now. When we circle back, of course, we'll hear from Jacoy and Omatangi briefly. Then we'll also gravitate to the topic of the day. Here's a question I'll be asking you this morning. Of course, we're reflecting back to what happened last week. We head back to look at the politics of the week that has been, as far as the National Prayer Breakfast also is concerned. We're asking you this morning, what do you make of Deputy President William Ruto's joke on Raila during the recent National Prayer Breakfast? Right. What do you make of Deputy President William Ruto's joke on Raila during the recent National Prayer Breakfast? Hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle. AM Live NTV, a profile name on Facebook. And 20686, our SMS portal. Also, you can tweet me at Dibala as well.